Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the action would merely match restrictions that the Communist Party put on American diplomats in China.
We're simply demanding reciprocity. Access for our diplomats in China should be reflective of the access that Chinese diplomats in the United States have, and today's steps will move us substantially in that direction.
Let's get more now from our senior editor, Derek Wallbank. Derek, tell us more about these restrictions and how far do they go?
Well, Yvonne, these are restrictions that the U.S. is placing on Chinese diplomats. What we're talking here is things like needing to get some approvals before meeting with certain university scholars, students, things of that nature, as well as some general other things. The thing that's really interesting about this for me is that the United States tends to not have reciprocity with other countries on some of its limits on some of these things, especially places it doesn't necessarily think of as freer. Diplomats in the U.S. usually can kind of do whatever they want to. Remember, the U.S. is a primary host country for the United Nations, and as such allows all sorts of people access to its soil, whether or not the U.S. actually has diplomatic relations with those countries. And in those places, folks can be more free than the U.S. folks might be otherwise. In other administrations, this has been seen as an asset, not a liability. The Trump administration, though, this reciprocity word you hear from Mike Pompeo is really, really critical. And you should read this into a couple of different things. One is the diplomatic access, but another one is it gives you a window into the Trump administration's thinking on business issues, specifically when it comes to things like WeChat, things like TikTok, where U.S. tech doesn't get the same leniencies that Chinese tech might in the United States.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, Derek. We are hearing, at least on some of our reporting here, that the thinking surrounding, we might get more details on the thinking on TikTok and WeChat and that ban in terms of what that might cover and when it actually takes effect. Do we know anything more at this point?
David, we're watching for later this month, somewhere around September 20th, for details to be posted in the Federal Register on exactly how the Trump administration's WeChat and TikTok restrictions are going to work. And what we're talking about here is both scope and implementation. On the scope, remember that WeChat is ubiquitous throughout China. And so if you were going to, let's say that you're Starbucks and you're at a Starbucks cafe in Shanghai and you want to pay for your grande latte or whatever you're buying, you might do that on WeChat. Now, Starbucks is going to be in a really bad way really quickly if you can't do that. So U.S. businesses have been looking to see what the limits are going to be, especially those with Chinese operations. The second thing is, how quickly does this come in? Does this implement immediately, or is there maybe a grace window for implementation? Now, what I'm looking for there, I'll leave you with this, David, is what if that implementation window is longer than a transition to a possible new administration? Because then if you've got an implementation window out to maybe January, it's conceivably possible that a new administration, if Joe Biden wins, could make some changes before this takes effect. Just something to be thinking about here as we go forward there, because, again, you're coming up onto that time, and that sort of thing starts to play here on all scenarios.